and Mike Jones, NFL writer for The Athletic. Mike, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. How you guys doing?
We are doing
great.
well. So round one is in the books from Green Bay. I mean, nobody's surprised now by the massive crowds that turn out. Another one in Green Bay. Were you surprised that the Browns gave up the haul that they did to move from 5 to 2 to grab Travis Hunter? That's a
You mean
sexy
the
move.
Jags.
Jags, my bad.
With the Browns, yeah.
Sexy move by the Jags to move up from 5 to 2 to get a guy who's a generational type player that could play on both sides
I
of the
couldn't
ball.
believe the Browns gave up on him.
Yep.
Well, I mean, I think when you're the Browns, you're looking, and yes, he's a great weapon, but who the heck's going to throw to him? You know what I mean? Like, they have a lot of holes that they're going to have to really start refilling. They need stuff along their offensive line, stuff along the defensive line. They got to figure out the quarterback situation in the next, couple years. So for them, it was an opportunity to give yourself resources to try to rebuild / retool as you figure things out. So it was a perfect situation for them, and they also were taking calls to possibly move back. Again, they did not. So that made a lot of sense. And if you're the Jaguars, look, you got a new head coach, you got a new GM, a new team president, and you're trying to invigorate this fan base that has been just, struggling and enduring, just years and years of disappointment and dysfunction. So it was a statement move for them. They already have a quarterback, so they needed somebody electric to energize this fan base and give Trevor Lawrence somebody to go to, somebody that's going to give them a spark on both sides of the ball. So both teams got what they needed. And yeah, it was a lot, and we'll see if it was too much. Everybody I talked to has said, everybody but one person, I pulled probably about a dozen people. Most everybody said that Travis Hunter is a lockdown corner in the NFL and a pretty good wide receiver that, they'll see. They imagine he'll be in packages. Now, some said, hey, we'll see if he can go both ways. Only one person that I talked to thought that he was a better wide receiver than with elite skills to go up and get the ball than a cornerback. So we'll see what happens. But, if he is a guy that, gets, an interception, 6 interceptions a year and has 4 or 5 touchdown catches a year.
Pretty sick.
Then that's pretty good.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So sticking with quarterbacks, were you surprised at 21 that the Steelers went defensive tackle and not a QB there? Were you surprised that the Giants moved back into the first round and took Jackson Dart?
I was surprised that the Steelers. Yes, I was surprised that they didn't take a quarterback right there. I don't know that means that they have, things hammered out with Aaron Rodgers, which some people are saying, oh, is this what this means?
Right.
But they felt very strongly about that defensive lineman that they got, which, they need when you think about who they play. They gave up 300 yards and got gashed by the Ravens in the playoffs. So they need somebody because, Cam Hayward is getting up in age. So they need somebody there. And maybe they've, taken the pulse and felt like there's an opportunity for them to still get Sanders, who, by the sounds of things they like, but how much? Was I surprised about the Giants? I wasn't surprised that they jumped up back into the second round. A little bit surprised that it was Jackson Dart, but there were some people I was asking around, like, okay, give me a surprise that's going to happen in the first round. And some people thought that we could see maybe 3 or 4 guys, quarterbacks, taken in the first round. But one person said that Jackson Dart would be the second quarterback taken. That was the pick that they had for the surprise. So there were people that were high on him. We'll see what happens with Sanders. I feel like he's going to wind up in a good situation. Look, we've seen, Jalen Hurts was a second round pick and he just, helped, lead the Eagles to a Super Bowl. Is Sanders going to be that? I don't know. I do feel like a lot of the stuff with Dion, people don't want to deal with headaches, for a guy that they feel like, okay, he's a good athlete. He's got some things you can work with, but we don't need to give up a first round pick. Again, people probably have him marked, graded, pretty decently, but felt like they took the pulse of all the other teams in that part of the draft, and nobody was desperate for a quarterback so they could meet other needs.
What did you make of what Washington did? Most kind of expecting it to be a little bit what we perceived as more need-based, like an edge or corner. Offensive tackle depth, though, you could never argue with. I think this staff here, everyone just keeps talking about it. They just earned the benefit of the doubt, so everyone's kind of behind it. But there was surprise.
Yeah, a little bit of surprise, but really, think about what they have. They have a quarterback that could be a generational type of talent. And what do you have to do? You've got to look at, what the Eagles have done. They've built in the trenches. That offensive line is, fantastic. Look at, Baltimore. They're always investing in their offensive line. So they felt like they had to do that. Now they got Laremy Tunsil, and, he's the left tackle. But, is this a move that they feel like this kid can play right tackle for a couple of years, then move over to left? I don't know. But they feel like, look, we've got to make sure that our bookends are sound. And now they've got some versatility. They've got a number of guys on that offensive line group that can play multiple positions, whether it's, a swing tackle or a guard / tackle. And that's what you need, especially, if there's injuries. So I felt like it was a pretty good pick. It was interesting, though, that it was him and not Josh Simmons, who a lot of people had rated a little higher, but the injury concerns kind of scared them away.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see what else happens the rest of this draft for them.
Mike, I kind of hate how good Howie Roseman and the Eagles are at just collecting talent. They sit at 31, and Jahad Campbell, a guy that we saw mocked, like anywhere in the 10 to 15 to 20 range, falls to them at 30, 31. And with the Nakobe Dean injury at linebacker, he can just plug him right in and, hit the ground running at 31. What did you think of that pick?
Yeah, Howie Roseman is just really good at his job now. We know that they're going to move around, and I bet you there's going to be more moves, but they know how to identify talent, and it seems like they always have a really good guy that winds up landing in their lap. When you are built in a way that you have so much depth and talent, you don't have to, you can basically go after what you need. And that's what they were able to do. They needed to get a pass rusher. They talked to the Chiefs, moved up one spot. It's interesting because the Chiefs weren't going to, take him. They had their sights set on a left tackle, but they moved up a spot. And they get a guy that's got a lot of range. I know he played off ball in college, but they see him as a guy that's going to come off the edge. They're going to move him around and do a lot with him. And so that defense, which already has a bunch of freaks along their defensive line, gets another guy to help on the edge.
Well, the Falcons double dipped on the edge. They take Jalen Walker at 15, and then they trade back into the first round at 26. And they take James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee. So, that's a team that identified we need to get after the passer.
Yeah,
and we're going to take not
do
one, but two guys in the first round to accomplish that.
Yeah, they had 31 sacks all of last year.
Mm-hmm.
31. That is just, really awful. And you've got a defensive-minded head coach in Raheem Morris. Last year, people thought they were going to take a pass rusher, and they got a quarterback. So this year they made sure, okay, look, we're getting a pass rusher first, and then we're going to make a move and get another pass rusher to make sure that we are really able to be aggressive and take care of the needs that we have there. And, they've got a division that's got, Baker Mayfield, good quarterback. We'll see what happens with Bryce Young, but he seems improved. And so for them to be able to get, two guys coming off the edge, that really should help their defense.
So, tonight in the second round, we were kind of talking about Cleveland. They got the 33rd pick. They got the 36th. The Raiders have the 37th. They've got a veteran quarterback, but, it's probably not a long-term deal. Saints sitting at 40. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Cleveland Browns passed on a quarterback at 33 just because Houston and Tennessee are behind them, who don't need quarterbacks. But at 36, I would expect them to do something. I'm not sure if it would be Sanders, not sure if it would be Milroe. Maybe I'm way off. Maybe they don't like any of these quarterbacks and they'll pass on it. But, some of these quarterbacks in these desperate teams that need them are going to go. So what are you thinking in the early parts of second round?
Yeah, no, I think that we're going to see kind of a run on quarterbacks. 2 or 3 that will go now. And the thing is look, none of these guys are guys that can, most likely can't start day one. They might need some time. When I was asking for comparisons for Sanders, I was told, kind of like Jordan Love is what he could be. Maybe he's more like Teddy Bridgewater, but going somewhere and sitting for a year wouldn't be the worst thing for him. We'll see what happens. Like you said, these teams need long-term answers at quarterbacks. They kind of have some Band-Aids at their quarterback position right now. But, they're going to be, we saw a decent amount of, moving around. There's going to be a lot more trades up and back and things like that. So I would expect those guys to come off the board pretty quickly.
Joined by Mike Jones, NFL writer for The Athletic. Tell us why you think the Chiefs got a steal at the end of the first round. And Josh Simmons, I know his season was cut short with a knee injury, but they think he can be Mahomes' real protector in the future.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The way that he was playing last year, or his junior season, and the first half of his senior season before that patella tendon injury that required surgery, a lot of people thought that he was, probably the best tackle going to be coming out of the draft, the top 5, top 10 pick. And so when they began their evaluation process, the Chiefs had him really circled and spent a lot of time getting to know him, learning about his injury history. He said that they talked and followed up and examined way more than any other team. So he wasn't even surprised when he got the call from them. They had, just done that much research and been that much communication. And they feel like, okay, it's really hard to get a quality, franchise cornerstone type of left tackle, and they had a guy that, he's coming off of injury, so that caused him to slide down into their lap, and they're never in position to be able to draft one of those guys that early. So, they feel good about his recovery. They are not going to set a timeline. He thinks it's going to be training camp, but they feel like, okay, we got Jalen Moore from San Francisco, who played a lot when Trent Williams was injured, but he could be our guy to start with, and then eventually we have our long-term solution here in Josh Simmons.
So the Bengals take Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M mid-first round. Does that open the door for a Trey Hendrickson deal on day 2 or day 3?
Good question, Cakes.
Well, we'll see. But the thing is their defense was so bad. They gave up so many points, so many passing yards. You need more than one pass rusher. If they are serious about competing in that NFC North, where you have, Lamar Jackson, and you've got to be able to get after the quarterback. And so they haven't been able to get something done with Hendrickson yet. But, maybe they still get something done. We'll see what other teams will offer now that, the first round is out of the way. That was probably too rich an asking price. But, we'll see how it plays out.
One of the names that I was surprised didn't go in the first round, because this is a guy, you looked at every mock, he was going anywhere from 8 to 10 to 14, maybe in the 20s, but Will Johnson slips. So he slips. He's, if you look at a lot of the best players available, he's right at the top so far. So I know he had a lingering injury. Maybe people are worried about the knee. Were you surprised Will Johnson out of Michigan, a stud corner, who's been compared to Patrick Surtain? That's a comparison. Were you surprised that he didn't go in the first round?
Yeah, well, I was a little bit, but the thing is there were only 2 cornerbacks taken in the first round, So
yep.
Teams had other needs kind of circled and highlighted there, but whoever gets him will probably get a first round level talent. And so it's, unfortunate for him, but it's good for the teams that they were able to get a guy who could be a really impact guy at, basically a bargain type of a deal. But I think it was just the way teams' needs shook out. And, the injury probably had something a little bit to do with it, and they knew, okay, a little bit of dinged here, so we can afford to pass on him and then maybe get him in the next round.
Mike, we're going to let you run, man. We know you're busy at this time of the year. It's Mike Jones, NFL writer for The Athletic. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, buddy.
All right, thanks, guys.
Yep, that's Mike Jones from The Athletic. 800-636-1067 is the number. When we come back, we're going to take your calls. Where do you go in round 2? What's your pick at 61? Good luck trying to guess what Adam Peters and his staff are going to do. Nobody thought they were going to take Josh Connolly Jr. out of Oregon. He was the pick at number 1. Now you got to set your sights on 61, the second round draft pick. Do you stay there and make the pick? Do you move up for a guy that you love? Do you move back to accumulate extra picks? Give us the guy that you love in round 2. 800-636-1067. We'll take your calls on draft day, day 2, next.